Excellent. So, thank you for joining. I'm going to talk a bit about grading and feedback. With that said, I got a nice little presentation here to go through, but I'm going to be jumping out over to the Vosa's platform a lot. But the basic agenda is just to see how we can go through and do the grading, where the grading center is, what sort of things need to be graded by the teacher, what items will be graded by the system instead, how I can give feedback and which different forms can I give that in, and where I can run reports or where do students see their scores. So at any point, you can go and see work that students have submitted by clicking on the Save and Submit button at the bottom of any assignment by going to the Teachers panel and then Grading. I'm going to jump over and show that here soon. But within the grading screen, you'll see three different tabs. One that's requires grading, another that's activity results, and a third that we've called the gradebook. These different tabs will allow you to assign, or rather grade any work that was assigned or any work that your students have turned in altogether if you've allowed pages that are not assigned to be turned in. Another quick way to see the results, if you're just looking for your students' scores and you don't need to see all of the little details, is the View Results button next to an assignment. So let's hop over to the actual platform and see where all that stuff is. So in here, as I mentioned, under the Teachers panel, I have the grading screen. Okay. And within grading, I will see those different tabs available where I'll find all that work. But the shortcut version was here under Assignments. Okay. And if I look at a given assignment, I'll see the View Results button that will show me just who's done the work, who hasn't, and if the work is done, what the corresponding score is. All right. So the big focus of where a lot of this material will be is going to be, videos are on top, sorry, is going to be the main grading screen here. Now, within the grading screen, you'll see the questions, the answer key, your students' responses, and those can show up in a couple of different formats. We'll run through what all different types it can have. If it's graded on points, you can change whether it's marked right or wrong, whether it has that little check or X, or even just a little dash if it's partial credit. You can give feedback on particular questions by typing in the boxes next to each question. You can adjust the overall point score if, say, you'd like to just reduce it by a little bit because maybe it was late work. Give feedback for the page as a whole if you want to give general advice about all of the questions. You can also record your feedback if you want to give out audio advice, say maybe about how to pronounce something. So let's just see what all those actually look like in the platform, and then I'll go through some of the different ways that those might show up. So coming back over here, Teachers panel, and then Grading. A good starting point is Requires Grading. That's where all work that needs to be graded by the teachers will come. If I click on a particular class, it will show assignments that have been completed by my students. If I click on an assignment, it'll show me all of the corresponding information again. So the question here was a set of pictures. I have the answer key. This is an example where the student had a spoken response. So by clicking.
Me gusta más ir al museo porque me gusta el arte y me gustan las estatuas.
I'd be able to listen to the corresponding spoken response. If it's something that's graded on a rubric instead of points, the rubric is interactive. So I can just click on the corresponding level that the student performed at in order to let them know how they did. If I come down a little bit more, I'll see information including how much time my students spent, what their corresponding score that I've currently assigned is, that option to adjust the score that I talked about. You can also go negative if you want to remove points. I can give feedback about the page as a whole. When I hit initialize audio recording, this might yell at me right now because I've got Zoom going, but in general, it will start the recording options, and then I'll have a stop button once I'm done. Okay, so if I wanted to see some of those other formats, here you can have longer written responses where it also gives you the word count just to quickly see how much is there. I can go through, adjust whether it's marked right or wrong. If I give partial credit, it will automatically switch that over to that dash for me. I can give feedback on a particular question. Now, what do these other buttons down here all do? First, nice, convenient one is view on page. That will pull up the assignment exactly how it looked like for the student. So I see the work that they put in, what the picture in question was, whether it's currently marked right or wrong. Because this is teacher graded, instead right now it has this little eye icon telling them that the teacher still needs to look at it, etc. Everything here looks exactly like what the student would see. That I can pull up by saying view on page. If I hit reset, it will discard this attempt and say to the student, nope, you need to go back and try again. So this version of reset will completely discard the attempt. Another version of reset that I'll show in a minute will actually save that attempt as a previous response and archive it so that the student will be able to go back and try again, but you still have that record of their work. You also have the save button, which here in requires grading, that will save any of the scores that you assign and send it over to activity results, which will act as your full interactive gradebook. One more button that you might see here, if you've synced this with an LMS, is the save and sync button. It does the same thing as that save button, but it also will copy the score over to your LMS for you so that you don't have to put it in twice. Last button is cancel. If you just decide you don't like the changes that you've already put in, you can cancel at any time and restart. Okay. Any questions so far about just the basic grading setup, how those answers might display, etc.?
Well, if you read the messages, several of us have issues. Just read the text message.
Sure, one moment.
And then from there you will answer it. And we're waiting.
Yes, I was going to hit on that one later, but we can hit that now. Okay, so the question was, where does that feedback? So if I add notes to a particular question, where does that feedback show for my students? On the student side, they'll have that feedback, and I'm actually going to jump to the corresponding slide. They'll have that feedback on the page itself. Okay, if you left something in that big box, sorry, I'm just gonna log back in here. if you leave something in that big box at the bottom, page notes, it will show up at the top of the screen for them in that big orange box that's showing on the example screen. If you leave something next to a particular question, so if I put something into, say, this set of notes here, it will put that same note on the page. But if you look for that one that's marked with the X, it has kind of this yellow sunburst around it. That lets the student know that there's a note on that particular question. And if they click on the yellow sunburst, it'll come up with a pop-up that tells them what their feedback was. There's a couple of different places that I'll hit on later where that feedback might show, but that's the easiest way for the student to find it, is to go back to the page that the assignment was on and see either the general teacher notes that would include your audio recording at the top, or to click on that little yellow sunburst.
Okay, I have a question for you. Maybe
okay.
it's not the right time. I have students that they are different level within the same class.
Okay.
So eventually, probably will David have a meeting with you to see if I have to break the class into different groups or 3, because I have a particular class and give them different books and go with them in a different way. I would need some advice on that.
Okay, yeah, that might be a great opportunity for another meeting later.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. Okay. Thank you.
David, can you hear me?
Yes, how can I help?
I have a question about the rubric, because sometimes I find they are very much too elaborate for the task. You know, and it's hard to like pick really when it's such a simple task. So can I get rid of it or modify it to simplify it?
Yes, absolutely. I know that Neil will be talking about making changes to pages. That's not something that you would do from the grading side. That's something that you would do from the page side. You'd actually go in and change the page to change the rubric itself. So I'm pretty sure Neil is up next and he'll be talking about that topic.
And if I get rid of the rubric, how does the grade get calculated, since the grade is based on what the choices you made in the rubric?
If you get, there's only 2 options for grading. So if you choose to remove the rubric, it will automatically set it to be graded on points instead.
Okay, and then I assign whatever point I want.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. I see a question about partial credit not updating. If you see a issue where something doesn't update when you hit save, there's 2 things I would suggest. 1, sometimes items such as maybe your student count or who has and hasn't completed the assignment, when looking at my view results button here, do not update immediately. But that can be easily solved. All you would need to do is hit that refresh button, load the page again, and everything should be updated. If hitting the refresh button does not solve the problem, please quickly just take a screenshot of the issue and email us at info@vocesdigital.com. So I'm just going to throw that into the chat here real quick. And we are absolutely happy to help you. We will get on that right away. But yes, in general, everything should update for scores when you hit that corresponding save button on any assignment. Excellent. Any other questions about this interface here so far? Oh, am I easier to hear now? I just moved my microphone closer.
David,
Excellent.
you,
Oh, sorry.
somebody else is playing a recording in the background and I don't know what it is. Is there any way you can like mute everybody?
Other genres that are related.
One moment, yes.
Thanks.
Okay, everybody else should be muted. Just go ahead and put into the chat. All good now? Nice and audible? Okay, yes, comments do remain so that you can review them at report card time. I'm gonna hit finish up requires grading here, but that's all gonna show up in activity results, which I'm gonna hit next. So the last thing to note before I move on to activity results here is just gonna be what all shows in the requires grading portal. In general, any items that need to be graded by the teacher will come to requires grading first. And you can do your grading there. And afterwards, when you hit save, it gets sent to activity results. Also, anything that is late, whether it is normally auto-graded or not, will end up going to requires grading. This is because we don't automatically assign a late policy other than whether we accept the work at all based on those options that you created when setting the assignment. So we leave it open to you to assign any late policy that you would like. That is an outstanding way to use that point adjustment option, because a common thing that I've seen teachers do is say, this assignment here is late. It's marked with that big old bold late notice, but it's auto-graded. And I see that my student got all of the questions correct. Now, I don't want to go through and adjust the scores directly and tell my students that they got the answers wrong. No, I'd rather leave this as correct, but I see that this is out of 8 points. So maybe I want it to be half credit because it was late. Instead, I'd come here and say -4 so that they now have half credit, but it's all marked correct. I can then just hit save and it sends it over to activity results and signs that score to the student. Another useful tool in requires grading is the grade all option here. So let's say there was a assignment that I maybe didn't assign and I just want to say, yep, I saw those, let's remove them out of requires grading. Or maybe there's a whole bunch of assignments that my students have turned in late and I just want to accept whatever the score that the auto grader assigned was. Those are great ways to use this grade all option. The first thing that it lets you do is select which pages you'd like to use the auto grader for. You can then choose whether or not you're going to mark all options correct. Or if I leave this blank, it simply uses whatever the auto grader assigns. Please note though, that for items that should be graded by the teacher, the auto grader will by default assign 0s for everything. You can also choose to have it just automatically look through and only auto grade those things that should be graded by the system and not auto grade anything that should be graded by the teacher. You can leave any general note that you want everybody to see and then grade all, and it will clear out all those items for you so that you free up a lot of space in your requires grading panel.
I have a question, David.
Yep, go ahead.
It's Margarita again, because from experience, I think I'm gonna limit the activities to grade. What I'm gonna go more is after at the end of every unit, you have a test. I'm going to use the activities to practice in the school, in the class, and I can see how they do. And then, because first it takes a long time, especially when they're recording, you can correct 2 or 3, but when you have 100 and something students, it's challenging. That's my case.
Let me make a suggestion. If you're
Yes.
not planning to fully grade these assignments,
Yes.
this is something that I believe Mike would have hit on with his presentation earlier. But when I'm going through and doing and creating an assignment, one of my options, I grabbed one that doesn't have questions. Let me run back here a little bit and grab a different
Yeah.
page. That will do. When I'm creating an assignment, one of my, I still have ones. Okay. One of my options is the modify point value setting. So if you are planning to just do this based on completion, whether the student completed the work or not, then your best option is to say modify point value and then credit, no credit only. That will automatically assign any points that you have for this, set up for this, and make it so that you don't have to go through and listen to everybody's response if you just want it to be credit, no credit.
And what is the part that they have in activities? I don't remember right now because I have the summer erase memory. Because sometimes what I do, I let them check what they were wrong and go back and redo it. There is one part you can do it, and it's pretty helpful because then when you test, that they have practice.
So just running through all of that again, that would be on that same screen that I had up just a moment ago. So if I select a page here, and then a class folder, if I'd like it for organization, any additional settings for due date. If I scroll down a little bit more and look at allow review, that's when it tells me when the student can go back, see what their scores was. It's also tied to when they can see that feedback that I left. So any of those page notes or question notes, audio recordings, etc. That's all tied to allow review here. I can change that by default. It's as soon as the student turns it in, but I can change that to not until the due date has passed or not until I release the results.
Thank you. I found it very useful because teaching a second language is a motivation for them to get it right, to learn. And that's what I think. I'm going to go that way this year. And just the only score I'm going to take into consideration, like for grading, will be at the end, the test, because they've been able to practice.
Outstanding.
Okay, thank you.
So with all of that hit on, let's jump back into the grading screens here and look at activity results. So activity results is going to be my full interactive gradebook where I can do all of my grading from this screen. I can come back at any point, and if I want to adjust scores, give more feedback, etc., I can do things from here. I can also see a record of how my students did on previous attempts or set things side by side as far as questions so that I see how my students' responses compare, etc. There's a lot of additional tools available here within activity results. The basic way that it's set up is it's divided by class, which I select at the top here. And then it's divided by page in the table of contents. So if I go to a page in the table of contents, I'll see a summary of my students' results. If it's blank, they just didn't turn anything in. If I see a score, do I have my chat box over top of the scores? It's one other. Here we go. If I see a score, that means that when I click on the student's name, it'll come up with all of my grading options again. So I'll have exactly that same grading screen. The interface there is all the same. I can go back, make any changes that I need, save those changes, etc. But there's a couple of extra options here. The first is that you'll notice that that reset button has changed. So that reset button now will archive the score instead. So when I go and say reset, I just haven't saved anything for this one. So let me pick a different one that I have saved it for. There's one that's already reset. When I say reset, it will save it as a previous score. I can click on it and it will show it as a previous submission. Now, this message here lets you know how many submissions they've had. And if I click on it, shows all of those responses again, so that I can see how they're doing on previous responses and see if they're making progress or not. Another useful item for that is reset all. If I just want to reset everybody's scores and say, hey guys, let's all try this again. That will be at the very bottom of my list of students so that I can quickly do it all at once. If I need at any point for a previous submission, I'll see that next to the date that it was turned in, there's a restore this result button. If I click that and then refresh my page, and find that page again in the table of contents, I'll see that that score is now the active one again, so that I can also go back through, look through my students' previous results and maybe just select the best score, or maybe use the one that they feel they did best on. Okay, so another useful result is let me jump to the other book where I should have an example of this. Is the grade by question button. What that will do is it sets all of your students' answers side by side so that I can see how they responded to each question. And I can adjust the scores accordingly to see if maybe everybody's giving the exact same response. Maybe there's something that I see they're all giving the same response on, and I want to focus on that for my review. All of that is available here by clicking on that corresponding button at the bottom that says grade by question. If you've synced this to your LMS, you'll also see a sync all button here as well. That will send all those scores over to your LMS again for you, so that you don't have to put it in twice. Just jumping back over to the presentation here, and I'll make all these slides available for you. I'll post a link at the end. It goes through all of the same information that I've been hitting on, just in a slightly different order. So next up, having seen how I can go through, do all of my grading, another common thing that teachers like to do is print out reports, whether that be something that you need for your administrator, something that you need for the students themselves, etc. Now I can print out just this little section right here using the print button at the bottom of my list of students. But often I want a much more complete, robust, etc. report. And I'll be able to get those reports by using the gradebook button. So here under the gradebook, everything is set up so that I first choose what and how I want it to display, and then I generate my report. So the first thing that you're going to choose is which chapters you'd like to review. Next, which class. You can choose whether it has all of the responses for a specific activity together or all of the responses for a specific student. You can choose what sort of format, like how the grid for your corresponding report is set up. There's a couple of different options depending on the grouping settings that you choose. And then these additional settings say, give limits or additional materials that might show up in your report. A very popular item there is the only show assign button, because by default, it will pull up a line for every single page in the chapter. And if you didn't assign every page, many of those will be blank. So only show assigned is definitely useful. Along the same lines, remove blank entries might be useful as well. That will remove any lines that there isn't a score displayed on. Include summary will put in totals, either for the chapter or if you set up assignments in your, or I'm sorry, if you set up folders in your assignments tab, it will show the corresponding totals for the folders as well. You can choose the include folder groupings tool there to also group it by folder to make that a little bit more clear. Include pre-edited or hide items. Just if you've gone through and made changes to pages, you can choose whether to include those items or not. Also, whether to include pages that you have not finished grading. But generally, the three major ones that we hit on are only show assigned, include summary, and then set submission date range, which lets you choose a starting point and ending point for what all this report will cover. Once I've chosen everything that I want to include in my report, I'd hit that generate report button. It will pull it up in a nice spreadsheet format that I can either download or print. Now, how this displays and what formats the scores will be in just depends on the corresponding settings that I chose. So you might want to look at the different settings that are available before choosing a particular setup. All right, so another thing that I was going to hit on was what are the other places that I can see my students' responses, rather that my students can see their scores are. We did mention that if at any point the student goes back to the page that they were on, they'll be able to see it either in that general teacher note or by clicking on any item that has that little sunburst around it. They'll see question-specific notes. But where else might they see their scores? I'm gonna hop out of the teacher's side here real quick and jump over to a student account. Let me pull up the login information for one of my sample students here. All right, so the first altogether overall best place to see a quick overview of the scores for the students is going to be the record of work page. They'll have one of these for every chapter. It's usually towards the end of the chapter, and it'll show up in their table of contents. In here, they'll see a line for every page in the chapter. If it was assigned, they'll see this little sheet or folder icon to tell them that they were supposed to do this page. They'll see their corresponding score. and a summary of any feedback that you've left under the notes section. But another nice thing that will show up here that doesn't show up in other places is they'll see their totals, both for the section, any folders that you've assigned, and for the chapter as a whole, all the way down to the bottom. So this is a nice overview point that your students can go to see what their scores were in general. Another good place, other than just returning to the page, is the assignments tab. On the student side, when they complete an assignment, they'll see that the due date has been replaced by the score. And they can see that for any assignment that they've completed. They can also use that Go to Assignment button to quickly jump over to that page, see any additional feedback that the teacher left, which questions were right or wrong, etc. if Allow Review has been opened already. One more good place that students might see their scores is when the teacher does grading manually. Students will receive a message in communications under Mail that will have their scores and that Go to Assignment button to jump directly to the page. Okay, I know I went a little bit quickly. Let me take a quick look over that that chat again, see if there's any other questions that I need to hit on. Okay, first item. Is there a good way to see if students have read your feedback? Unfortunately, I don't know that we have any sort of system to check for feedback. That's a great option for future updates. So I'm going to suggest that to our developers and have them look into whether that might be an option for the future. For right now, your best suggestion might be to have them look at that record of work page routinely, as that will include a summary of any feedback that you have. And I forgot to mention, if you're on that record of work page and you click on the name of the page, it'll jump you right to the page so that they can see the full feedback as well. So that record of work page is a nice overall review. So hi, Chris. They were just asking, is there any way that we can add a system to have students check that they've read feedback that teachers have left? That might be a nice update for the future. So another question that I'm seeing here is, do we have any sort of limit on how much feedback that we can leave? Are we running into a server space issue, etc.? No, you should be able to leave as much feedback as you need. And as they suggested, yes, you can also archive things at the end of a semester or class when you're done. That's actually done through I'm sorry, I'm on the student side real quick. Let me switch back over to the teacher's side. So if you wanted to just reset everything and start fresh for your new class, that's all found under the teachers panel in class management. When you click on a class, you'll have the option to either delete the accounts or archive them. That will basically clear any scores, any feedback, etc., so you can start fresh with the new year or semester. Now, the difference between the two is whether or not it keeps your scores for later. Delete will just delete everything for you so that you truly start fresh. Archive will keep a record of the scores for you, but still resets things. If you archive a class, and I'm just going to do that with my training class here so that you can see how that all works, it will ask for your class ID. Oh, drat, I've forgotten mine. So this is a great opportunity to see where to find your class ID. So that's here.
You mean user ID?
Did I say class ID? I apologize. You are correct, Chris. User ID. That will be displayed here. It's in white by default, so if I highlight it, it will all show.
That feature was put in place for students that happen to be looking when you go there and you don't realize it. So it's white to prevent them from figuring out how to log in as you.
So that class has now been archived. It does not show up in my list anymore unless I choose to show archived classes. The students won't be able to log into the class anymore, and I'll see that my students aren't listed here. So where do I find those scores now that they've been archived? Those are all going to actually still be available under gradebook. So that place where I went in order to generate reports. When I come here to the teachers panel under grading and then gradebook, I'll see that any classes that I've archived still show up in my class list. So I can still select my training class here, select the chapter, any additional settings that I want. So let me grab a couple there and then generate report. I'll get all my scores still available. I can download it, print it still, etc. It's all good to go. Any other questions? Well, we have a little bit more time here at the end. Are there any in the chat that I missed? Feel free to unmute.
Is there any way when you check the resets, you have assignment reset, you could see it side by side versus having to click each time you open it? So like you want to give the kid the higher score, but you say, and they did it 3 times. You have to click each time. Is there a way to put all those 3 scores beside one another? Do you see what I mean?
I certainly follow, and I apologize. My example didn't have multiple attempts listed there. By default, they'll actually be listed right on top of each other. So if the student had multiple attempts, oh shoot, I think I just archived the class that I had the example in.
I might have one. I'm checking now to see if I've got a.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Sorry. In general, yeah, they'll be listed right above each other, and each one will have that restore activity right next to it. So you'll be able to see them side by side. Any other questions? Incomplete is not necessarily missing. Yes. So that is a good question. If a student goes and is working on a page, for some pages, towards the bottom, they'll see a save and submit button, but they may also see a save button next to it. So if, say, they're doing their work and they hit save to go and maybe hit the restroom, etc., that work is still saved, but it hasn't been turned in yet. Let me just create an example of this here real quick. Oh, I just chose the teacher account again. That's unit 3. We're going to do activity 1. So if I start adding in responses, but then just hit save instead of save and submit, it'll mention that it's saved. And from the student side, it just looks like they didn't turn it in. From the teacher's side, now I did book 2, chapter 3, story 2, activity 1. So from the teacher's side, if I go and find that particular assignment again, chapter 3, story 2, activity 1, I should see something that says not submitted. So that response will still be available to the teacher, and I can choose to force submit it by doing the grading and saving, so that incomplete work is not necessarily gone, it's not missing, so long as the student has saved partway through. If the student does not save at all, then they just discard their work when they leave. Any other questions that you'd like to focus on? Again, feel free to unmute. Outstanding. Then I know I've got a couple of minutes here before the next corresponding meeting. Oh, I suddenly am seeing more questions here. Okay. Yep, we will hit on that real quick. So the teacher asked, hey, I have students that go, they might come to a different tab like Google Translate at different points while they are doing a assignment. How do I keep them from doing that? Or how would I go about adjusting my scores if I see that they do? Best option for that is to come here to the assignments tab. And when I assign the page, one of my additional settings will adjust that for me. So I go new assignment. When I'm creating the assignment, I'm going to actually grab one that I know will have questions. On this page here, the one with all of those additional optional settings, the one labeled prevent leaving will be a nice friend for you. So if I turn that on, it will disable the clipboard for me so that they can't copy paste. And if they go to any other page, any other window, etc., and then come back to the assignment, the very first time it'll pop up with a warning that basically tells them, no, they can't do that. If they leave more than the number of warnings you set, and you can set a number of warnings before they get any sort of issues. If they leave more than the number of warnings you set, it automatically turns in their work. Now that will interact with the other settings that you choose. So maybe if you set a submission limit, now they're out of tries. Or if you set clear on retake, now they have to start over with a blank copy. But that is a great option to limit how much your students are going, leaving to other windows or sites. That's a nice way to help deal with that.